But I do want to introduce Kirk. I'm not going to say too much about what you're doing, but really, based on everything I've seen, really, this is kind of the when do I use Tableau Prep, and kind of how do I get my data into Tableau, and really use this great tool to get data there. So I will hand it over to you, Kirk. It looks like you've got your slides ready to go.
Yeah, thanks, Caesar. And thanks also to Emily and Sarah and Lorna and Fee and everyone who, for organizing this. This has been great. And it's, real pleasure. It's my first time speaking, I think, at Tableau Fringe Festival. For people who don't know me, I've been in the kind of BI analytics space now for like 21 years, I guess. A lot of it with vendors, including a little bit of time at Tableau. And now I left Tableau about a little over a year ago to join Paint with Data, which is a consulting company that my wife Candy started. A lot of people might know her because she's a Tableau ambassador and Biz for Social Good. Today I was going to talk about, I should have called it, I guess, two main use cases for Tableau Prep Builder over at Tableau Desktop. I think there's probably about 5, but I think these 2 are kind of 2 quick ones. I see people try to solve these things in Tableau Desktop all the time, and it doesn't lead to a lot of fun, basically. A little bit of self-promotion, I guess. I just finished a book that comes out on the 30th for data modeling with Tableau. It's on Amazon. I checked today. It was first in its category. As you can imagine, that category is about as big as mystery fiction or something. But you take your little wins. And what we will do is, for the first 2 real data modeling questions today, if people want to ask them in the chat or otherwise, we can give away 2 free ebook copies of it. We'll find a way to get your email address and then we can get those to you. The book is broken down into 5 components, really. There's a whole part on using Prep Builder for modeling, as well as desktop, another one for desktop. And the data modeling on Tableau server and online, it gets into everything from securing data, row level security, how to model for ask and explain data, all those kind of things, how to schedule flows, all that. But the last chapter has got, it's got 4 use cases and scenarios that I think are really important to show how to use everything in the Tableau stack, from all the way from potentially virtual connections and all the way down to catalog on the other side, but everything and if you don't have data management, how to get to the same, to a similar place, I guess. So it's pretty comprehensive that way, hopefully, for people. Before we get to that kind of last chapter, one thing I think it's always worth resetting with people. I talk a lot about the first time I saw Tableau. I was working with another BI vendor at the time. It was way back in 2007, and I couldn't believe how fast it was and how it created visualizations for you, which is very different than all the other BI tools, which the first question that I was asked you is, what chart do you want? Whereas Tableau let your data, of course, show you what kind of chart you have. But in order for Tableau to work well, and I think, any of us have been using Tableau for a while, this either, and you think about it, or it and you don't think about it a lot, but Tableau's, no matter what you do, Tableau Desktop or creating, data source from scratch on the web, is always going to assume that your columns are fields and every row is a record, basically. So if your data doesn't look like this, you're going to fight hard with Tableau. And Tableau is not going to be fun, which in Tableau should be fun. And the other thing is your workbooks aren't going to perform. It's not going to perform on server, and it's just going to get worse. So I think so many of poor performing workbooks are because the data is not structured right in the first place. So in addition to this kind of neat table-based format, 2 other things I point out that people should think about all the time is every column needs to contain the values representing a distinct field, and ideally free from null values. So what does that mean? If we look at that category field, everything under it's a category, right? That's not a field where sometimes it's category, sometimes it's city, sometimes it's country. And you don't think about it, but data does come in a lot like that. And I'll give you an example of this one. The second one is data needs to be at the lowest level of aggregation that the analyst needs to answer questions on, and no rows can be missing. So lots of times we also don't think about missing rows, but there's sometimes implicitly rows that exist that we don't have in our data, and Tableau doesn't do well if it doesn't have those rows. And it's not always easy to disaggregate data. It's easy to aggregate data typically. But I'm going to talk about a specific use case of disaggregating data, and that's through a feature called New Rows in Tableau Desktop. So specifically, again, the 15th and last chapter in the book has use cases that are ideal for Prep Builder. Use case that depends on the use case, whether I would use Tableau Desktop or Tableau Prep. And so we can't do all of these today. So I want to focus on these two here, which are pivoting data from rows to columns. People are probably used to pivoting columns to rows. It's been in Tableau Desktop since maybe version 9 or 8. It's been in for quite a while at this point, but not rows to columns. You cannot pivot rows to columns in Tableau Desktop. And the other one is data, specifically date scaffolding of data, but much easier to do in Prep Builder than it is than trying to do it in Tableau Desktop. So with that, let's jump into product. These are always more fun with product. So first off, I wanted to show this, which is, so this is what Superstore looks like. I think this was one that I think Andy Kriebel threw up on data.world, I believe, which is the one that ships with the most current version of desktop. And you'll see it's the Superstore we all know and love. And at the end, we have these 4 measures, right? Like sales, quantity, discount, and profit, all neatly in their own column. That's the way Tableau likes it. It's going to interpret it that way. But sometimes our data might look like this. And if you've only used Tableau and not other BI tools, some other BI tools actually really like data this way, and they might like data this way even better than the other way. And this is what I mean by now, this field doesn't neatly contain like values to a field in it now, right? What these are, in Tableau speak at least, are these should be fields: quantity, discount, sales, and profit, and then their value sits over here. So you have to conditionally pull a metric out of that, right? And so this is very, I was going to say hard to do in Tableau Desktop. It's not hard, it's just really messy and hard to work with. So let's take a look. So if we look at the first, data, the way we would expect to see it, I can take that filter off for now. This is just a scatter plot. It doesn't tell us much. We all know, if you play with Superstore, you know that the Canon Inman class 2200 advanced copier is the most profitable and the one with the most sales. We've got sales on this axis, profit on this. The amount of sales is the size of the bubble, the discount's the color. But all I really want to show here, though, is to build this is super quick. It doesn't take any amount of time at all because Tableau's fun that way. But you'll notice I put 2 calculations in here. Now, in this particular case, average profit ratio might not make a lot of sense, but lots of times you do want to do a row level calculation, right? So the first thing you'll notice, and I'm also with Jen Shepard on I'd love a little filter other than just for calculated, but for non-calculated. So I'll vote for that one too, for anyone who was on an hour ago. The other thing we see here though is there's really only 2 calculations here. I just did this so I could easily put it in the title. So we could see that this has, just under 10,000 rows, but otherwise, these are 2 very different calculations, which could be another whole presentation, but this is a row level calculation, profit divided by sales. And the one that's, you would use more here is you'd want to aggregate sales and profit first. But this other calculation does tell us something, which is, if we averaged up the typical profit ratio here, what is it? A better calculation might have been, if I had wanted to do it, which would be even more difficult, is I could have taken the max of it probably, right? And then, we could see the most profitable order for that. But in any case, it's a row level calculation, that one. So if our data's not pivoted out, right, what we end up having to do is we end up having to write these kind of nasty, these aren't that nasty because they're easy, but they're nasty on our data source. So we have to effectively pivot out those column values, those row values in the columns by going, if metric name is discount, then call it discount, right? And then we have another one called profit, right? But you'll see by doing this, well, first off, what we end up with is we start with 4 times as many rows. And if you're in an actual enterprise, you're probably going to have more than 4 measures, right? So this would be way more row explosion. And the other thing, if we come over to our data source, which makes this data source not perform very well, is that we end up with just a ton of null values. And the other thing, because we pivot those out, we're still going to end up with at least as many columns. You'll see in a second, we'll probably get more columns. So we're not even narrowing our data source by doing that, at least in Tableau, because you have to pivot it out. So it's not good to do that. In fact, I tell people I would never, ever do this beyond prototyping. You might want to prototype, but then I would 100% of the time go to prep, some kind of prep tool, prep or otherwise, to make this change. The other thing you'll notice is that I can't do the same way that top profit ratio. You'll notice the average profit ratio at a row level, at an order level, doesn't exist. The reason it doesn't exist is because if I look at profit ratio and I go to edit, because profit and sales, as you saw 30 seconds ago, never exist on the same row. Because although we pivoted them out this way, we're just getting null. So when there's sales, profit's null, and when there's profit, sales is null. So we can't do this calculation. So you could do this calculation, and people who love LODs might kind of get off on these calculations, but it's not going to perform that well. And again, you're going to have to be, you're going to have to be pretty good with Tableau to do some of these calculations and wrap your head around it. This level of aggregation, by the way, doesn't matter. I could have went sum and sum, because there's only going to be one value for every product name in every order, because the way the data is in Tableau, right? But you have to know that and think. It's not in Tableau and Superstore, but you have to think about that. Anyway, this way I could get that row level calculation if I, for instance, put that on tooltip, and you should see I should get 38.5. So you can do it, but if we do this, I could have put in the right spot. Oh, whoops. And then you have to think about, wrap your head around the fact that I don't want a sum on that. I want an average on that, again, just to make it even more complicated. There's our 38.5, right? So again, we could have done a max or whatever on it. So anyway, this is kind of, hopefully you're getting how messy of a process this is, and that data just doesn't work well for Tableau. So what you could, when Tableau Prep came out, it didn't have this feature. So you might have looked at Tableau Prep early and didn't even realize this was in here, because it never used to be in here. I should have looked up. I can't remember. It came out in the last couple of years, maybe about halfway through its lifetime. But if we look at these Superstore bad measures, and we bring this in, the first thing we're going to notice right away when it comes in is the first thing, like almost anyone who uses prep a lot will recommend, is building a clean step between every step. It just really helps understand, the shape of your data. So we're going to do a quick clean step here, and we should see in a second that we have about 40,000 rows. Again, that's our 39,992 or whatever it was that we had. But what we want to do is, it's really simple here to just go pivot, right? And just like you can in desktop, there's always been, I believe there's always been pivot columns to rows and prep, if memory serves, even from Project Maestro, for anyone who goes back that far. But now you can pivot rows to columns. So to fix that little problem we have, all you have to do is take that metric name and say, that's the column I want to pivot, right? And then it says field to aggregate new columns. So that's effectively, what are the values for these rows, which are going to be measure values. And all I have to do is drop that in like that. And then I go, again, just to make it clean, I go to make a clean step. And if I preview this in Tableau Desktop, we should see that it's as easy to build this one with the 9900. Here we go. As I tax my poor system. So this is going to come up now. And again, if what we do is I went sales, profit, and then we have product name on detail. And again, I guess what I could have done first to show is we could come here and just show that we have 994 rows. So we don't have that big, almost 40,000 row count anymore. And we get this up here, and now we've got profit and sales neatly as a calculation, and we could do that row level calculation and rebuild it. So in the interest of time, I won't build that, but it would only take another minute or two. It wasn't a complicated viz. So that's the first one, is that this like conditional columns is just like a complete no-no, makes Tableau not very fun to work with. and perform very poorly. So now use rows to columns that pivot. Super slick, easy to clean up quickly. So I'm gonna get rid of this one. So the next one I wanted to talk about was this: when you want to pivot, when you need to have data that's missing, basically. So it's really disaggregating data in a way, but it's definitely doing a date scaffold. This is also a feature that only came to Tableau Prep, I think, last year. I think it was in 21.4, but it hasn't been that long in any case. It might have been 21.3, where we need to add rows. So imagine this scenario. It could be any subscription. You can see I live in Canada, that mobile phone plans would be this outrageous. But what you see is this would be typical for a subscription. Could be the type of data where it just gets recorded once of how many years you signed up and what your rate is. But the person's going to pay monthly for this, or even if they pay yearly, if you sell it monthly from a financial accounting standpoint, you're going to have to take that money reporting wise every month. So what you need is, there's a whole bunch of rows missing here. And specifically, I want us to answer the question, how much do people owe us? How much are we going to collect in January of 2023? So next month from the time of this recording. If you took this into Tableau, it would be almost impossible to get that answer. It would take a lot of it would take really nasty table calcs that wouldn't hold up that well and be very slow. It's the only way I've ever seen it done. Again, effectively, you can't do it. So you could do, without it, you could do date scaffolding. So Ken Flaherledge wrote a great blog on this a while back now. So he, 4 years ago now, and around the same, maybe even longer ago, Bethany Lyons had a whole TC presentation that took the whole hour on this topic. And when Ken shows it, he also shows it in Tableau Prep. But at the time, 4 years ago, Tableau Prep didn't have this feature. So let's look at how easy it is to do this now. So we're going to come into Tableau Prep again, and I'm going to go, I guess that's modal. So I'm going to go File, New, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring this out and we're going to disaggregate it and get extra rows. So I'm so bad at cleaning up. Just a sec. So bad at cleaning up my old one. So we're going to connect to data. This one I think is called bad measures or phone plans. Here we go. And then so what we want to do is what we want to do again. We always want to do a clean step first. The next thing we need, the easiest way we're going to make this on ourselves is, in order to add new rows, I find the easiest way, at least personally, it's easier for my logical brain, is to do it between two dates, right? So we need a start date for, an end date first. So this is really contract start date. We need our contract end date. So we can calculate that. Tableau Prep makes it pretty easy. I'm going to click on there just so I get that in. I'm going to go end date, and then I'm going to just do a date add at the month level so how many months do we need to add? So basically what we need to do is we need years times 12, because that's how many months we have. And then we're going to take one away from that. Order of operations, I don't need the brackets, but I don't know, how better for my brain to do that. I don't know about other people, because I think about it in that order. The reason why it's -1 is we already have the first month. They already paid for the first month. So we'll see this in the data. That'll make sense. I'll be honest, the first time I did this, I didn't do the -1. And then you're like, all right, I need to do a -1. The other thing I do is I usually wrap it in a date. You can change it in the UI, of course. It's only because Tableau is going to take every one of those date calcs and turn it to a date time. So we want a date here. So now I have an end date, and we can test our end date. So calculated fields, if you don't use prep, always show up at the start when you do it. But it is Tableau, so everything's visual and direct. I can pull my start date there before my end date, and we can start testing this, right? So I could say, Candy, I think was the one with the 1 year plan. You'll see that her start date was June 6, 2021. So her last payment would have been the 22nd, the 2nd of May, 2022. So that worked. And anyway, we could test the 3 year one should be 2021 to 21 last month. So that works. So now we have our end date. So now what we need to do is we need to add rows of data in between our start and end date. So I'm going to come here, and I am going to do new, it's called new rows, the feature. Again, you can add from one field, but to me, it's a lot easier in my head to go, I just want to go from the start date to the end date. And then I could call this billing month or whatever you want to call it, billing month. And then we want to add 1 month. And then we want to copy from the previous row because they keep paying us the same amount on, every month, right? It's the way the contract works. So when would you use this not or zero and day? I say a good example all the time is, people run marketing campaigns. Talked all about marketing in the last presentation. You take marketing campaigns and then people don't respond to the marketing campaign. You don't get a row of data, but like they did effectively, it was a 0 that day. So you could fill that data in this way as well, except that time you'd want a 0 to say no one responded to your campaign. So even though whatever you're using to track it, Adobe Analytics or whatever doesn't track it for you, you can add the row that you need to add. So now just about done here, so we could jump to Q&A. We had a clean step in, and now we want to have that answer to that question of, it's really just that simple, right? And then we want to answer that question of, what did I say, next month, how much do people owe us? And now it becomes very easy to answer that question as desktop fires up here. I'm just going to come up here. And now what we could do, of course, is we could just go rate, and then I could take our new billing month and put it up here. Oops. And go to month, and we could go $260. So there you see, and we see the curve of what people are going to pay us, not just when their contract started. And it's really that simple to add rows. So that's the 2 use cases. I think, the other really, really obvious use cases, you want to clean up, bad data in prep, things like field names being messy and those sorts of things, because those string calculations are really expensive in Tableau Desktop. But of the 2 kind of mathy ones, I think these 2 are the 2 big ones, and it's worth doing these 2 things every time before you bring data into Tableau Desktop. So I'll stop there and leave 7 minutes for questions.
There was one question that came through Q&A, and it's essentially it's from Doc. He said, have you done any comparisons between prep and Alteryx? And he's kind of wondering if you should teach Alteryx or prep, or maybe even just a coin flip to his students.
Yeah. So my first bias, so I have 2 biases to Alteryx versus prep, being a Tableau person. A Tableau and a Mac person. So I'm a Mac person and I hate running VM. So I can't even run Alteryx, to be fair, Doc. I would expect, all things being equal, if the customer already had Alteryx, would be fine to teach Alteryx because the product's more mature. The big advantage to prep to me is if they've got desktop, they're licensed to prep anyway. There is a conversation about without data management, you can't schedule, but there are somewhat kind of ways around that. So I'm kind of a big fan of prep, I guess, for 3 reasons. Mac, 2, if they're a creator, they already have it. And then 3, the gestures are so similar to desktop, and the calculation language is exactly the same. So just the learning curve to prep is going to be so much lower for anyone who already knows. So yeah. Raphael has a question there as well, right?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and is there a way
is there a way? Yeah. Go ahead, Caesar, you read it off.
Oh yeah, is there a way to get around not being able to use multi-table extracts in the output? For example, allowing relationship in the model rather than joins. At the moment, I'm working with a huge data source, and that can't be aggregated any further, 400 million plus rows, and joining that to another table. That I need to, you said explode the data, but explore the data even further.
Yeah, so there's, it'd be fun to talk about these all day, but there's, so not being able to use so one of the things you would see that you would definitely, one of the things that you definitely can't do in prep is do a live connection. So therefore the concept of extracts doesn't really make sense, because, of relationships doesn't make sense because you have to extract the data first. But if you had a ton of data, what I would probably do is break it up into different tables, especially if you can write out to tables, which you can do in prep now. And then I would union those tables back together at the end to get it, would be again, there's a lot of probably subparts to that as you get into the details, but
It looks like there is another question here, and it's oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, it's from Lorraine. She's asked, we scaffolded the dates to create a calendar view in Desktop. Would adding a row for each day in prep work for that?
Yeah, so if you've already scaffolded the dates if you've already scaffolded the dates in Desktop, that's fine. This would just save you from having to create that date table and do the join and make sure you create filters to eliminate the top and end of the join. If you've already done a date scaffold in Desktop, you might want to keep it because you've already done the work. But I would say for anyone who has the use case and hasn't done that yet, it's way easier to do it in prep for sure.
All right. No more questions from the audience. Taking a look through and seeing if there's anything that came through the chat. Nothing quite yet, but no, that was incredibly helpful and insightful. We're waiting on Vince here to come through for his session too, but we might have a minute or so while he comes over.
Yeah, and who asked the first two questions, Doc? Yeah, if you Kevin, if you want a book for sure, I can get it to you, like an ebook. I said it for the first two. And then if we captured who asked the second question, I'll follow up with you, Caesar. But yeah, happy to get those out. The book is full of exercises, so it's probably better in a print copy just because it's all like it's a very hands-on book. But, I don't know about anyone else. I was shocked that there wasn't a book already, to be honest.
I love the concept, really, of being able to go through and do a lot of the data modeling in prep. It's funny because I think when I started using Tableau, one of the challenges was to do everything in Tableau. Let me go through and get my data ready for the visualization. But now seeing prep and getting everything working in that manner has definitely helped.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that are, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have write access to a database, which could partly answer that other question, there's some slick things you can do, like, because prep always has to output data somewhere, but you could output to two different tables, say in Snowflake or somewhere. I don't have a preference for any database over another. Then you could then create a relationship in Tableau Desktop between those two tables, right? So there are very creative things you can do across the stack. And I just think, you know, a lot of people, when they think about products like Looker, because of LookML, think, oh, it's got such a stronger data model than Tableau. It's just a more explicit data model, whereas Tableau, you really have to know what you're doing because it exists in a lot of places. So, like, I think a lot of people don't even know you can add calculations to someone else's published data source, for example. Like, they think if it's a published data source, I can't do anything with it, right? So